The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cluttered design studio as Lyralei Voss stood frozen, her hands trembling as she held the worn leather folder. Across from her, Zephyr Castellanos sat calmly in the vintage armchair, his dark eyes reflecting a mixture of patience and disappointment. "So, now you know," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of months of unspoken truths. Lyralei's heart pounded against her ribs. The documents in her hands felt impossibly heavy. Contracts, business licenses, financial records, all bearing the same signature. Zephyr Castellanos, owner and creative director of Ethereal Threads fashion house. "You own everything," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the silent sewing machines. "The boutique, the brand, the building, everything I thought I was building my career on." Zephyr nodded slowly. "I do." "Then why," the question burst from her lips, "why did you let me treat you like some annoying customer? Why did you stand there while I dismissed your suggestions and practically threw you out of my own studio?" A ghost of a smile played at the corners of Zephyr's mouth. "Because sometimes the most important lessons can't be taught. They have to be learned." 3 months earlier, on a rain-soaked Tuesday morning, Lyralei had been adjusting the display of evening gowns for the 4th time. Ethereal Threads occupied a corner space in the historic arts district, its large windows offering perfect natural light for showcasing contemporary fashion. At 28, Lyralei had poured every ounce of her passion and savings into this boutique, determined to make her mark in the competitive world of fashion design. He stepped back to admire her handiwork, pushing auburn hair from her face. The midnight blue gown with hand-embroidered silver threads caught the morning light beautifully. This was her life's work. Every stitch, every decision, every sleepless night had led to this moment. "Still moving that dress around, I see," came a warm voice from behind the counter. Lyralei turned to see Marlo Chen, her part-time assistant, emerging from the back room with steaming coffee. At 19, Marlo possessed an uncanny ability to read people and appear with caffeine exactly when needed most. "It's not quite right," Lyralei admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. "The lighting changes throughout the day, and I want it positioned perfectly for afternoon shoppers. You know what I think?" Marlo settled onto the stool behind the register. "I think you're nervous about the fashion blogger coming this afternoon." Lyralei's stomach tightened. Indira Blackwood, the city's most influential fashion blogger, had agreed to feature Ethereal Threads in her weekly Spotlight series. It was the kind of exposure that could launch a career or destroy it. "I'm not nervous," Lyralei lied. "I'm prepared. Every piece has been carefully selected, the lighting is perfect, and I've rehearsed my talking points a dozen times." The bell chimed, and both women looked up to see a man entering the boutique. He was tall and lean, with prematurely silver hair that contrasted sharply with his youthful face. His clothes were expensive but understated. A perfectly tailored charcoal suit that whispered rather than shouted its quality. What struck Lyralei most were his eyes, dark, observant, and somehow familiar. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent. "I hope I'm not intruding. I was walking past and couldn't help but notice your window display." "Not at all," Lyralei replied, switching into professional mode. "Please, look around. I'm Lyralei Voss, the designer and owner." "Zephyr Castellanos," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm and warm, his fingers bearing small calluses that spoke of someone who worked with his hands. "Your work is quite striking." Lyralei felt a flush of pride as Zephyr moved through the boutique, his gaze taking in every detail. He paused at the midnight blue gown, studying it with the intensity of someone who understood the craft behind the creation. "This is exquisite," he said finally. "The way you've incorporated the silver threads creates movement even when the garment is still. It's almost like capturing moonlight on water." "Thank you," Lyralei said, genuinely pleased. It wasn't often that customers understood the deeper artistry behind her work. Zephyr continued his circuit, stopping occasionally to examine pieces more closely. When he reached the section of day wear, he paused, his expression thoughtful. "Might I ask," he said carefully, "have you considered working with more earth tones in your casual collection? The jewel tones are beautiful, but I wonder if incorporating warmer, more grounded colors might appeal to a broader demographic. Lyralei's smile faltered slightly. I appreciate the suggestion, but I'm quite confident in my color choices. I've studied the market extensively. Of course, Zephyr said quickly. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. It's just that I've noticed a trend toward more natural, sustainable aesthetics lately. Colors that evoke nature. Sage green, terracotta, warm grays. They seem to resonate with conscious consumers. I appreciate your input, Lyralei said, her tone cooling. But I prefer to trust my own vision and training. I graduated from the Fashion Institute with highest honors. Zephyr nodded, seemingly unperturbed. Your training shows in every piece. I hope you'll forgive an old admirer of fashion for sharing his thoughts. He moved to the register, where Marlowe was watching the exchange with interest. I'd like to purchase this scarf, please, he said, selecting a silk accessory in deep emerald with gold threading. As Marlowe rang up the purchase, Zephyr turned back to Lyralei. Thank you for allowing me to browse. Your boutique is truly special. I hope you don't mind if I return. I have a feeling I'll be quite inspired by what you create next. After he left, Marlowe raised an eyebrow. Well, that was interesting. Did you see how he looked at everything? Like he was seeing something we weren't. And those suggestions about earth tones were unsolicited and unnecessary, Lyralei finished firmly. I appreciate that he appreciated my work, but I didn't ask for his opinion on my color palette. Over the following weeks, Zephyr became a regular presence at Ethereal Threads. He would arrive at different times, always polite, always purchasing something small, and always offering gentle suggestions that Lyralei found increasingly irritating. The window display is lovely, he commented on his third visit, but have you considered rotating the pieces more frequently? Perhaps every week instead of every 2 weeks? It might draw in repeat foot traffic. Lyralei looked up from her invoices. Mr. Castellanos, I appreciate your interest in my business, but I have a system that works for me. Of course, he said, selecting earrings from the jewelry display. I simply thought that with the restaurant district picking up on weekend evenings, you might capture more of the dinner crowd with fresh displays. Despite her annoyance, Lyralei found herself paying attention. The man had a point about weekend foot traffic. I'll consider it, she said curtly. On his fourth visit, Zephyr examined her new autumn collection with his usual careful attention. These are stunning, he said, running his fingers over a wool coat in deep burgundy. The tailoring is impeccable. Though I wonder, have you considered partnering with local accessory makers? Handcrafted leather bags or artisan jewelry could complement these pieces beautifully. This time, Lyralei set down her sketches and looked at him directly. Mr. Castellanos, can I ask what you do for a living? I work in fashion, he said simply. In what capacity? Various capacities over the years. His evasiveness only increased her irritation. Look, I'm sure you mean well, but I've been in this industry for years. I know how to run my business, select my inventory, and market my designs. I don't need a customer telling me how to do my job. Zephyr's expression remained unchanged, but Lyralei caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Hurt, perhaps, or disappointment. You're absolutely right, he said quietly. I apologize if I've overstepped. Your work speaks for itself. He purchased the coat without another word and left. It was harsh, Marlowe said after the door closed. Was it? Lyralei snapped. He comes in here week after week acting like he knows better than I do how to run my own business. It's presumptuous and frankly insulting, but some of his suggestions have been pretty good, Marlowe pointed out. You did start rotating the window display more frequently, and sales have picked up on weekends. That's coincidence, is it? And what about his comment about earth tones? I've been doing research, and he's right, there's definitely a trend toward more natural, sustainable colors in fashion right now. Lyralei sighed, running her hands through her hair. I need to trust my own instincts. I can't start second-guessing every decision based on comments from customers. But privately, Lyralei had begun to notice things. Weekend foot traffic had indeed increased since she'd started changing her window displays more frequently. And when she'd researched natural colors, she'd found exactly what Zephyr had described. a growing consumer preference for earth tones and sustainable aesthetics. Despite her harsh words, Zephyr continued to visit. His demeanor remained friendly but more reserved, and he offered fewer suggestions. When he did speak up, it was with careful consideration. "I notice you've been working with more sustainable fabrics lately," he observed during one visit, examining a dress made from organic cotton with natural dyes. "It's a smart direction. Consumers are becoming increasingly conscious of their environmental impact." "Yes, well, it's important to evolve with the market," Lyralei replied, not mentioning that she'd started researching sustainable options after his earlier comments. "Have you considered reaching out to local fashion schools?" he asked another time. "They're always looking for real-world experience for their students, and you might find talented interns who could help with the workload." The suggestion was intriguing, but Lyralei's pride flared. "I prefer to maintain direct control over all aspects of my business." "Of course," Zephyr said. "Quality control is essential." But as weeks passed, Lyralei found herself increasingly overwhelmed. Orders were picking up, but she was struggling to keep up with demand while maintaining her standards. She was working late one evening, hunched over her sewing machine, with her back aching and eyes strained, when Marlowe knocked on the studio door. Leah replied, "You've been here for 14 hours. Maybe it's time to go home." "I can't," Lyralei said without looking up. "I have 3 custom orders due this week, and I'm behind on the new collection." "You're going to burn out," Marlowe said gently. "Remember what Mr. Castellanos said about interns? Maybe he had a point. I can handle this on my own." "I know you can," Marlowe said, "but should you have to?" The crisis came on a Thursday morning in early November. Lyralei arrived at the boutique to find Marlowe waiting outside, her face grave. "What's wrong?" Lyralei asked, fumbling with her keys. "Mrs. Ashworth called," Marlowe said. "She's canceling her order for the holiday collection, all 12 pieces." Lyralei's blood turned to ice. Mrs. Ashworth was one of her most important clients, and the holiday collection represented significant projected revenue. Did she say why? "She said the pieces didn't feel current to her. She's going with a designer who's more in touch with contemporary trends." Lyralei sank into the chair behind the register. Mrs. Ashworth's words echoed, "More in touch with contemporary trends." "There's more," Marlowe said hesitantly. "The fashion blogger who was supposed to feature us next week is postponing indefinitely." She said, "Our aesthetic feels dated compared to other boutiques in the city." The words hit Lyralei like physical blows. Dated, not current, out of touch. That evening she stood in her studio surrounded by sketches, fabric samples, and half-finished garments, feeling more lost than she had since opening the boutique. The bell chimed, and she looked up to see Zephyr entering. He looked around, noting the sparse displays and the general air of dejection. "Good evening, Lyralei," he said gently. "How are you holding up?" "Fine," she said automatically, then stopped. "Actually, no. I'm not fine. I'm struggling, and I don't know why." Something in his tone, not pity but genuine concern, broke through her defenses. "I don't understand what I'm doing wrong. I've studied fashion. I know the trends. I work harder than anyone I know. But lately it feels like I'm constantly behind, like I'm missing something everyone else sees." "Fashion is a complex ecosystem," Zephyr said carefully. "It's not just about technical skill or artistic vision. It's about understanding the zeitgeist, the cultural moment, the subtle shifts in consumer consciousness." "I thought I did understand," Lyralei said, her voice small. "You are good at this," Zephyr said firmly. "Your technical skills are exceptional, your artistic vision is unique, and your dedication is unquestionable. But perhaps you've been so focused on proving yourself that you've closed yourself off to collaboration and outside perspective." Lyralei looked up at him, seeing something in his eyes that she'd missed before. "You've been trying to help me, haven't you? All those suggestions? You weren't just being a know-it-all customer." "I was trying to share what I've learned over the years," Zephyr admitted. "But I wanted you to come to your own conclusions, to maintain your independence and authority." "What if I told you," Lyralei said slowly, "that I'm ready to listen, really listen?" Zephyr smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in weeks. I'd say that's the first step toward growth. They spent the next hour talking, really talking, about fashion, trends, consumer behavior, and the delicate balance between artistic integrity and commercial success. For the first time since opening the boutique, Lyralei felt like she was learning something genuinely new. There's something else, Zephyr said as he prepared to leave. Something I should have told you from the beginning. What do you mean? Zephyr reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. He placed it on the counter and stepped back. Peter picked up the card, her eyes scanning the elegant script. Zephyr Castellanos, Creative Director and Owner, Ethereal Threads Fashion House. She read it again, certain she'd misunderstood. This doesn't make sense. I own the building, Lyralei. I own the business license, the brand name, the entire operation. You've been working for me from the beginning. The room seemed to spin. But I signed a lease. I have contracts. You have a management contract, Zephyr said gently. You're not an employee, but you're not an independent owner either. You're running the boutique operation under the Ethereal Threads umbrella. Lyralei sank into the chair. Why? Why would you let me believe I was building my own business? Because I wanted to see what you could do, Zephyr said. I wanted to see if you had the vision, the drive, the talent to make it work. And you do, Lyralei. You absolutely do. But you've been so determined to do it alone that you've been sabotaging your own success. I don't understand. I've been in this industry for 25 years, Zephyr said. I started as a designer just like you. I built my first boutique from nothing just like you, and I made every mistake you're making now. Refusing help, dismissing advice, trying to prove I could do it all myself, and so this was all some kind of test? No, Zephyr said firmly. It was an opportunity for you to learn, to grow, to become the designer I could see you had the potential to be, but I wanted that growth to come from within. What happens now? Depend on you, Zephyr said. You can be angry and insist on going your own way, or you can see this as the beginning of a real partnership, one where you maintain your creative authority while benefiting from my experience and resources. I need time to think. Of course, Zephyr said. But, while you're thinking, remember this. The fashion industry is not a place for lone wolves. The most successful designers all have teams, mentors, collaborators. No one makes it alone. That night, Lyralei couldn't sleep. She paced her apartment, her mind racing with everything Zephyr had revealed. Part of her was angry, but another part was intrigued by the possibilities. She thought about all his suggestions, the earth tones, the sustainable fabrics, the window displays, the interns, the local partnerships. Every single one had been spot on, and when she'd reluctantly followed his advice, her business had improved. More importantly, she thought about the way he'd offered that advice, never demanding, never condescending, always respectful of her autonomy. He could have revealed his ownership at any time, could have simply issued orders. Instead, he'd chosen the harder path, guiding her toward discoveries she could claim as her own. The next morning she arrived early and spent time really looking at her work with new eyes. The pieces were beautifully made, but Zephyr had been right about the colors, the trends, the overall aesthetic. She'd been so focused on proving her technical skills that she'd lost sight of what customers actually wanted. You look different, Marlowe observed when she arrived. Did something happen with Mr. Castellanos yesterday? You could say that, Lyralei said. She explained everything, Zephyr's revelation, her shock and confusion, the realization that she'd been so focused on independence that she'd been blind to opportunity. Wow, Marlowe said. That's actually pretty amazing. Amazing? I feel like I've been living a lie. But have you? Marlowe asked. You've been doing the work, making the designs, serving customers, building the reputation. The ownership structure doesn't change any of that. I suppose not. But it changes how I see myself. Maybe that's not a bad thing, Marlowe said gently. Maybe it's time to stop seeing yourself as someone who has to prove everything and start seeing yourself as someone who has something valuable to offer. That afternoon, Lyralei called Zephyr and asked if they could meet. He suggested a small cafe in the arts district, far enough from the boutique to allow for private conversation. She arrived first, claiming a corner table. When Zephyr arrived, he looked cautious but hopeful. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Lyralei said. "I've been thinking about everything you told me, and I have questions." "I'm sure you do. First, I want to apologize for dismissing your suggestions, for being so defensive, for refusing to see what you were trying to show me." Zephyr held up a hand. "There's no need to apologize. Your reaction was completely understandable. Did you? Or did you give me exactly what I needed, the chance to learn and grow without losing my dignity?" Zephyr's expression softened. "I hoped you might see it that way eventually. Tell me about your background," Lyralei said. "I want to understand who you are and how you got to this point." Zephyr leaned back, his gaze distant. "I started designing when I was 15. My grandmother was a seamstress and she taught me the basics. By 25, I had my own boutique in Milan. I thought I knew everything there was to know about fashion. I failed," he said simply. "Spectacularly. I was so arrogant, so convinced of my own brilliance, that I ignored market trends, dismissed customer feedback, and refused to collaborate. My boutique closed within 2 years. What did you do then?" "I swallowed my pride and went to work for other designers. I spent 5 years learning from masters, understanding not just the creative side but the business side, the marketing side, the human psychology side. When I finally opened my own business again, I did it differently." "How so?" "I built a team from the beginning. I sought out mentors and advisors. I listened to customers, to critics, to anyone who could help me see my blind spots. Most importantly, I learned that success in fashion isn't about being right all the time. It's about being adaptive, collaborative, and humble enough to keep learning." "Why me? Why did you choose me for this experiment?" "Because I saw myself in you," Zephyr said. "The talent, the drive, the dangerous combination of skill and pride that can either lead to greatness or to failure. I wanted to see if I could help you avoid the mistakes I made." "What would a partnership look like?" "Whatever we decide to make it," Zephyr said. "I'm not interested in controlling your creative process or diminishing your authority. I'm interested in combining your fresh perspective with my experience to create something neither of us could achieve alone. I would want creative control. You would have it, and I would want to maintain my identity as a designer, of course, and I would want to learn from you. Really learn, not just pretend to listen." Zephyr smiled. "I would like nothing more." The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it was profound. Working with Zephyr, Lyralei began to see her designs from new angles, to understand the broader context of fashion and consumer behavior. They spent hours discussing color theory, not just from an artistic perspective but from a psychological one. Zephyr showed her how certain colors could evoke specific emotions, how cultural trends influenced preferences, how seasonal shifts affected purchasing decisions. "It's not about abandoning your vision," he explained as they reviewed her latest sketches. "It's about expanding it to include a deeper understanding of your audience." Together they developed a new collection that maintained Lyralei's signature style while incorporating the earth tones and sustainable materials that were resonating with contemporary consumers. They brought in 2 interns from the local fashion school, bright students who brought fresh energy. They partnered with local artisans to create complementary accessories, building a network of creative collaborators. Most importantly, they established a rhythm of collaboration that respected both of their strengths. Zephyr would share his market insights and business acumen, while Lyralei would translate those insights into creative solutions that reflected her unique aesthetic vision. "You're not losing your identity," Zephyr told her one evening as they worked late. "You're expanding it." The results spoke for themselves. Within 6 weeks, sales had increased by 40%. The fashion blogger who had postponed her feature reached out to reschedule, intrigued by the exciting new direction she'd heard about. Mrs. Ashworth returned, apologizing for her hasty cancellation and requesting pieces from the new collection. But for Lyralei, the most important change was internal. She no longer felt like she was constantly struggling to prove herself. Instead, she felt like she was growing, learning, becoming the designer she'd always had the potential to be. 6 months after their partnership began, Lyralei stood in the boutique's expanded space, watching customers browse the carefully curated collection that represented the best of both her creative vision and Zephyr's market wisdom. The boutique buzzed with activity, interns working on new pieces, customers trying on garments, Marlowe managing the register. "Satisfied?" Zephyr asked, joining her at the window. "Getting there," Lyralei said with a smile. "Though I have some ideas for the spring collection that I'd like to run by you." "I'd be honored to hear them," Zephyr said. "But first, there's something I want to show you." He led her to the back office, where he pulled out a folder she'd never seen before. Inside were photographs, sketches, and documents that told the story of the original Ethereal Threads, a boutique he'd opened 15 years earlier in another city, one that had flourished under his guidance before he'd sold it to pursue other ventures. "This was my first real success," he said, pointing to a photograph of a bustling boutique that looked remarkably similar to their current space. But it was missing something: the fresh perspective, the innovative spirit that comes from true collaboration. "You've been planning this for a long time, haven't you?" "Not planning exactly, but hoping that someday I'd find a designer who could take the Ethereal Threads concept to places I never could have imagined alone." "And you think I'm that designer?" "I don't think it," Zephyr said with conviction. "I know it. The past 6 months have proven it beyond any doubt." As they stood there, surrounded by the tangible evidence of their successful collaboration, Lyralei felt a profound sense of completion. Not the kind that comes from achieving a goal, but the kind that comes from finding your place in something larger than yourself. "There's one more thing," Zephyr said, pulling out a final document. "I've been working with my lawyers to restructure the partnership agreement. I want to make you a full partner. 50% ownership, equal say in all major decisions, your name on all the official documents." Lyralei stared at the papers, her heart racing. "Zephyr, I don't know what to say. Say you'll continue to challenge me, to push the boundaries of what we can create together. Say you'll help me build something that neither of us could achieve alone." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Absolutely yes." As they worked together over the following months, Lyralei began to understand something profound about success in creative industries. It wasn't about being the most talented individual or having the most original ideas. It was about being open to growth, willing to collaborate, and humble enough to learn from others. 2 years after their partnership began, Lyralei found herself mentoring a young designer named Kai Nakamura, a talented but stubborn recent graduate who reminded her remarkably of herself at that age. "I appreciate your suggestions," Kai said after Lyralei had offered gentle guidance about market trends, "but I prefer to trust my own vision." The words were so familiar that Lyralei almost laughed. Instead, she shared her own story. Her initial resistance to Zephyr's help, her gradual realization that collaboration could enhance rather than diminish her creative authority, and the profound growth that had come from opening herself to mentorship. "I'm not asking you to abandon your vision," Lyralei told him. "I'm asking you to expand it." Kai's expression softened, and Lyralei saw the first crack in his defensive armor. It would take time, patience, and careful guidance, but she could see the potential for growth that lay beneath his pride. "Think about it," she said, "and remember, the strongest designers aren't the ones who never need help. They're the ones who are wise enough to accept it when it's offered." As Kai left the boutique, Lyralei felt a profound sense of completion. The circle was complete. She had moved from student to teacher, from someone who needed guidance to someone who could offer it. "He reminds me of someone I used to know," Zephyr said, joining her at the window as they watched Kai disappear into the crowd. "Really? Who?" "A stubborn young designer who was so determined to prove herself that she almost missed the opportunity to become truly great." Lyralei smiled, remembering her own journey from isolation to collaboration, from pride to humility, from struggling alone to thriving in partnership. "She sounds like she was pretty lucky," Lyralei said. "No," Zephyr replied, his voice warm with affection and respect. She was pretty wise. It just took her a while to realize it. Whether you're starting your own creative journey or looking to grow in your current field, remember that collaboration doesn't diminish your authority. It expands your possibilities. The strongest among us aren't those who never need help, but those who are wise enough to accept it when it's offered. What do you think? Have you ever had a mentor who challenged you to grow? Or maybe you've been in Lyralei's position, letting pride get in the way of opportunity. Share your own stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your experiences with mentorship and collaboration. Until next time, remember, your greatest strength might just be your willingness to admit you still have something to learn. The ripple effects of Lyralei and Zephyr's partnership extended far beyond their boutique walls. Within 18 months, their mentorship model had sparked a movement across the fashion district. Other established designers began adopting similar approaches, creating opportunities for emerging talent while fostering collaborative environments that challenged the industry's traditionally cutthroat culture. Local fashion schools started incorporating humility workshops into their curricula, teaching students that technical excellence must be paired with emotional intelligence and openness to feedback. The workshops, inspired by Lyralei's transformation story, became so popular that they expanded to business schools and creative programs nationwide. Zephyr's investment philosophy evolved, too. He began seeking out other promising designers who exhibited both exceptional talent and dangerous pride, replicating his patient mentorship approach across multiple ventures. His hidden ownership strategy became a case study in business schools, demonstrating how authentic leadership sometimes requires stepping back rather than stepping forward. Most significantly, the fashion industry began recognizing a new metric of success, not just individual achievement but the ability to elevate others. Awards ceremonies started honoring collaborative excellence, celebrating designers who built thriving creative communities rather than simply creating beautiful clothes. The transformation proved that sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't breaking rules, it's breaking down the walls that prevent us from learning from each other.